Okay, we are in a discussion of AWS Solutions Architect, and we've been discussing about AWS messaging types previous week, and we're going to discuss about a new topic today, which is called API Gateway, Amazon API Gateway. Uh, in a messaging, when you're talking about messaging protocol, the API gateway act as a broker, like in the middle, uh, connecting communication in between customers and then the backend servers, which customer getting required information. So let's have a look. What is an API and then how does it works, right? So API, actually API is the whole meaning is application programming interface. So it's a set of rules and protocols. So application programming interface have a rules and then protocols that allow different software application to communicate and exchange data with each other. So this one act as a broker to talk between two of them. Let's say you working with a website and getting some information from website, and then application programming interface link between a web server and getting a required information back to you. So think of it as a bridge between client. So client may be a mobile application in your mobile or can be a website, and a server or service, it defined how requests are made and how responses are returned. So when you request something, uh, application programming interface help to get responses back to you. So before we going into more details, let's have a look what are the real world examples of application programming interface being used. So the first one is here says restaurant analogy. So you order food from a menu through a waiter. Like a waiter acts here as the application programming interface. So he will bring you a tablet and ask, "Are you ready for your order now?" Then you say, "Yes, I'm ready for my order." So what do you want to order? Then you say a list of food items that you're going to order, and he marked it in the tablet, and then waiter communicates your order to the kitchen. So kitchen prepares food and then process, and waiter is going to return your mail into a table. So that's one of the applications. The second one is like a weather app. When you check your weather, you put in your postcode into the weather app in your phone, and then API request the data from a weather service server, and then it will respond with the details for weather, like are you getting a temperature forecast, are you getting rain today, or something like that. And the Google login is the same thing, like when you log in with the Google's API is going to verify your identity and then going to provide one of the service which you requires or which you request from Google back to you. And then e-commerce checkout. So when you something buy online, use eBay or whatever, and then you use the credit card, and then the website uses the payment gateway API like Stripe or PayPal and securely process your transaction, and then make sure it does in securely. So that is part of API gateways, right? So let's have a look what is this Amazon API Gateway? So API Gateway is a fully managed service. It's a one of the service for creating, publishing, maintaining, and monitoring and securing API at any scale. It eliminates the complexity of managing API infrastructure while providing comprehensive feature for modern cloud native applications. So if you want to design something like a API today, so you have to do a programming and they all sort of interconnected. But as I explained in my previous video, about messaging, they are all microservices. So these microservices work together with the help of API interface, and then they making a huge system into a different smaller size services, but whole system work together to uh, make sure that the process happens. So here is one of the picture taken from the web. So the web client 1 and 2 uh, are using API gateway and doing some request. And the first one is a customer one. Let's say you are requesting for service one. Service one is provided by Elastic Load Balancer through Elastic Container Service Cluster. So it's a microservice. And then let's say it's looking for a document. So API gateway interact with the S3 bucket and will return back the document. And then to think about us asking for service 2. Service 2 is going through Elastic Load Balancer, and then the service provided by Amazon is EC2 with the auto scaling sort of devices. And so this name resolution and everything, Amazon Route 53 is going to help you to complete this task. So that's where the API comes into the working. So you could see what the supported type of APIs are: REST API, and then you call WebSocket API, and then HTTP API, and then you get a gRPC API, that is a Google service. All right. Okay, so let's look into what are the key challenges in modern API management and how API Gateway addresses them. So, modern API challenges are application programming interface is in between service provider and the customer, basically. So, so it's one of the challenges. Security threats is one of the challenge. So you can have those attacks and unauthorized access and data breaches, injection attacks. But see that the API gateway solution is they got a built-in DDoS protection via AWS Shield, that service, and then you can use API key for authentication like SAML, Java Web Tokens, and Open Authentication 2.0, and then you can get web application firewalls. You can integrate that for and you can request validation and encryption. And then the other one is if you designing something yourself, so you're going to face scalability issue. And so, but when you have a traffic spikes, so this is the best way, like cloud solution. So you don't need to capacity planning beforehand, because it will auto scale according to the capacity what you want. Like let's say you're getting something in the festive season, like in the Christmas time, a New Year time. So you're going to get a more request from your e-commerce website, but it's all auto scale will handle concurrent connections, right? And then a challenge is rate limiting and throttling. So API use you got preventing abuse, managing quotas per client sort of per different programs. So you can use built-in rate limiting and throttling features, right? And that is so controlling whatever the rate limiting and throttling challenge uh, in the service, and then monitoring and visibility. So you got the monitoring and visibility tools in AWS. So uh, CloudWatch and logging responses, right? Error tracking, debugging, and you can get a performance dashboards and alerts. So you're going to get troubleshooting and monitoring tools underneath, right? Then you have versioning and breaking challenges, right? So so you can test with the different multiple API versions, and then you can have um, management. So dev test and production environment, and then you can have blue green deployment. So and then you have a cost management. So cost management, if you're doing something similar to this one, you possibly have to install softwares, develop softwares. You get to use hardware. So in here, you only have to pay as you go pricing, right? So you can use pay as you go. That's another advantage using in the cloud. And then you have integration complexity, right? So that's a developer side, but here a lot of services are integrated with this API gateway. So you can think about what is your requirement, and then you're possibly going to find out some sort of service within AWS. You can help to get your requirements sorted. So that's another advantage, I believe. And then you got a challenge deployment and maintenance. So you don't have much trouble because your deployment and maintenance platform is already there, and you have a lot of uh, facilities for that, like cloud formation, Terraform, automated continuous integration and continuous deployment, and then you're possibly going to have a rollback capabilities as well, right? So that is challenges, and what are the solutions provided addressing, right? All right. So let's look into API gateway differs from traditional API solutions. So traditional API like monolithic solutions, like we have a sort of a comparison we always do in our videos. So infrastructure management. So so fully managed serverless environment, right? So traditional solutions have self-manage your own hardware with patches security, scalability, auto scaling. Uh, Traditional method is a manual scaling, right? Cost model is pay as you go. Uh, Traditional model is fixed cost, licensing fees, hardware investment. Setup time is so long in the traditional because you have to develop your solution, get it tested, and get ready. Something need to be changed. A lot of effort need to be done. Security and compliance. So sort of certification here, built-in security, right? So HIPAA, PCI DSS, SOC 2, lot of things in there. So monitoring and logging tools there, and then the integration going to make your life easier. And then availability is also very high. If you have something happen to your infrastructure, so you're going to have a trouble until you get back things are up and running. Not easier like in a cloud environment, right? And then key advantage of Amazon API Gateway here. So you could see, right, no infrastructure overhead, cost efficient, enterprise ready, seamless integration, and then scaling. So a lot of features are available in there, right? Okay, then let's have a look briefly what are the API types supported by Amazon API Gateway. So the first one is like a popular one in these days, REST API, representational state transfer. So this is most common and widely used API type is HTTP, get, post, put, delete to perform operation on resources identified URL, right? Request response model, client sender request, server response with data, web application, mobile application, CRUD operations, traditional web service, right? So so this one is a pros, simple, standardized, cacheable, stateless, right? Uh, so the cons is can be inefficient for real-time communication. This is not like a two-way communication, real time, right? And then second type is a WebSocket API. This is two-way persistent communication between client and server over a single TCP connection, right? So it's a bi-directional, right? And then real-time chat, live notifications, online gaming, live dashboards, stock price updates. So you will get that immediate response, right? So pro real-time one WebSocket API. Only cons is it's more complex to implement, right? Also, the server need to be there, and then HTTP API serverless optimized. So it's a lightweight alternative to REST API, right? Only the difference is this one got a less feature than actual REST API, the easy for simple situations and basically not ideal for complex integration. And then Google Remote Procedure Code, gRPC, right? That is a high performance modern remote procedure code framework. HTTP2, fast, efficient communication, right? So this is low bandwidth. Only the difference is a steep learning curve. That's human readable or idea for browser-based clients. So that is like interface-based clients, not much in a browser-based client, right? Internal services. That will be really good, right? All right. So what we have already discussed is the fundamentals, right? Understanding API and the real-world application, and then what is it and how it works. We discussed how it's working between in the middle, uh, REST, WebSocket, HTTP, and gRPC API, core capabilities, security monitoring, and scalability. So use the case and best practice, right? All right. API types comparison here. Uh, so the protocol, communication, base for latency, and complexity. So you can see each one protocol supported, and then communication, right? So last two is bidirectional. Uh, First two is request response, and then base for CRUD operations, web services, right? Uh, Latency is higher, lower, very low in these ones, right? Uh, Complexity is there as well, right? So this table compares all these four features. I think it's here. Same thing is in here. So quick comparison matrix here with each of different APIs. So you have a latency cost, real-time support, only WebSocket support in here. Just going to highlight the things and feature richness, right? So REST API is full, easy of use, browser compatible. So only a gRPC is not browser compatible. Everything else are browser based models. So decision guide which API type should you choose, right? So how you going to decide which API should use? So there are few guidelines, right? So if you can choose REST API if you need full feature support, complex integrations, caching, building traditional web services with diverse client types, right? And then HTTP API, you can use building a serverless applications, right? Minimize cost while maintaining good performance. That's less features in there. And then WebSocket API is a real-time bidirectional communication, right? And then gRPC, right? High performance microservices architecture. Then you just need to go with the gRPC. Okay, so let's look into the API selection and decision tree, right? How are we going to select? Okay, so start which API do I need? So if you need a real-time bidirectional communication, then you have to go with the WebSocket API. It's like a real-time chat, dashboards, live notifications, and persistent connections. There's always a connection made with the server and client. And then this says you don't need real-time communication. Then internal service to service. Yeah, then you go to Google remote procedure code and protocol buffers, right? And then you say, no, that's not for internal service. Then you go need advanced features like caching, complex transformations. Then you got to go with the web type, API, HTTP or HTTPS. That's REST API, full features, right? Go with the REST API, and then you have less budget, um, less complex, right? And then you go HTTP API, right? And here it says internal service, and then you can go to gRPC API. But if not web based, then you back again go to HTTP API, like which you have serverless and Lambda, 70% cheaper modern microservices. So that is how you're going to select decision tree when you're selecting which API to go with, right? and comparing API types, when to use each in Amazon API Gateway, right? Okay, we have some sort of okay. So it's still we going to do more more detailed comparison, right? So let's have a look at API type, right? So and then API, REST API, HTTP API, and then WebSocket API, right? So that three. So REST API is good for complex integration, right? And then you have a latency, right? Uh, then simple request response patterns. You go HTTP API, and then you have real time persistence, bidirectional communication, live updates. Then you go to WebSocket API, right? So cost is normally 70% cheaper than the rest with HTTP, right? And then WebSocket charge per connection minutes, how long it's been keeping the connection, and the features, right? So you have features in that column, and then you could see um, integration. Almost everything is integrated. A lot of services in many other services in provided by AWS, right? And then you have a request response and then user cases. REST API dashboards, public API with complex logic, right? HTTP API, the mobile apps, simple serverless backend, and then WebSocket API is persistent connection like in the gaming, stock ticker, collaborative tools, right? So when to choose, right? So so REST API, you have to use advanced caching, right? Full-featured API gateway. The HTTP API is like a sort of a budget, less complex model, and then WebSocket API is persistent connection, real time, right? And then you got something called GraphQL. So bespoke query language, multiple data sources, mobile customers queries, reducing overfetching, right? So that's a sort of a different type, which is good for mobile apps, complex data relationship, and developing tools, right? So core values, proposition, and user cases, right? So this is a managed service API, and then it's integration, integrate with AWS. Lot of integration. So you could see Lambda, DynamoDB, S3, like step functions. We're going to talk about the step functions in another video. Application sync and more, right? Flexible routing to backend services. So to provide data back, you can see flexible routing to backend services and serverless optimized FTP APIs, right? All right. So the other features it has security and authorization features, right? So authorization and authentication. So we discuss what is authentication and what is authorization. So authentication is identifying the user, and then authorization is once you identify what user can do, what resources it can access, something the difference between two. So the authentication, so identity and access management for fine-grained control. And then we're going to talk about cognito user pools for user authentication. So we're going to talk separately in a different video. In cognito, it's also identity and access management system which is provided by AWS. So the OpenOauth 2.0 is industry standard authorization protocol support. So also access control and protection. So usage plan enable throttling, so client rate limiting, and then secure wise web application firewall integration protect from common web exploits and malicious bots, right? So this is, if anything comes up, you come into mind. These things are interconnected with this API gateway, and then you see performance and scalability, right? So the features, you have API caching, improve response times and reduce backend load. So that caches some of the readily available data in the memory, and then provide, rather than taking time to go back into server and get the detail. So deployment is stages, so separate production is staging and test environment. So then private API securely secure VPC only access for internal application. So you see that it can isolate into a VPC level. So API gateway skills automatically handle millions of requests with CloudFront, edge optimized endpoint routing through 100 plus global location for lower latency. See that you can use CloudFront with this one application to make sure it's got different endpoints spread in the world, global locations for lower latency access, right? Management and observability. So monitoring, that's another important thing to troubleshooting and monitoring. CloudWatch matrix, right? So API performance and latency, and then you can have versions, right? So stages and versions control, right? And then you can have a detailed performance matrix and distributed tracing with X-ray, right? Those are the things, management and observability. And finally, we're going to have just discuss API invocation and deployment, right? So you can use to control them in management console, and then you got AWS CLI commands, and then SDK development kits, Python, Java, Node.js, custom HTTP clients, right? And if you see the uh, deployment flow, is something really repeated. Sorry about that. I think that is all about AWS Amazon API Gateway. Uh, that's all for today's video. I was able to, with a single topic, so was able to finish with the whole video with the 33 minutes. And we'll see you guys from my next video. Going to be a new topic. Until then, thank you very much.